Hey guys, tonight we drift into a world of frostbitten cities, thick beards, and imperial tantrums. You're walking through the cobbled streets of late 17th century Moscow, boots crunching on ice as a crowd gathers near the Kremlin. Everyone's eyes are locked on one figure, Peter the Great, tall, scowling, scissors in hand. He steps forward. There's a man kneeling before him, hands trembling in prayer. The Tsar grips a tuft of the man's beard, lifts it like a flag of rebellion, and snips. One clean cut, and the whiskers fall to the ground like dead feathers. The crowd gasps. You swallow hard and touch your own chin. Bad idea. He notices. He's walking your way. You probably won't survive this, at least not with your facial hair intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments, because I want to know where in the world you're drifting off tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are living in a world where a beard isn't just a style choice, it's a political statement, a cultural line in the snow. And you're about to learn just how serious things get when one man with an empire and a pair of scissors decides to take grooming personally. Peter the Great wasn't always Peter the beardless tyrant. He was a boy once, albeit a curious one. Born in 1672, he grew up not exactly fond of the Russian aristocracy's traditional ways. Fur coats, heavy religious rituals, and yes, beards so thick they could hide a small spoon. The Russian elite prized beards the way modern influencers prize ring lights. You didn't just grow one, you nurtured it like a bonsai tree. But Peter had seen other worlds, and those worlds were clean-shaven. When he traveled through Europe incognito, yes, incognito, even though he was 6 feet 8 inches and trailed by a 200-person entourage. He saw a different way of life. Western men trimmed their faces. They wore tailored coats. They built ships and read books, and most shockingly to Peter, they didn't worship their facial hair. So what does a czar do with this info? He returns home and starts cutting. That ceremonial shaving in Red Square wasn't a one-off stunt. It was Peter's declaration of war against the past. In 1698, he officially imposed a tax on beards. If you wanted to keep yours, fine, but you'd need to pay for the privilege and carry a small metal token to prove it. You imagine the first man who had to cough up rubles and flash his beard license to a suspicious guard. Awkward, humiliating, but also absolutely real. That token, by the way, it was bronze or copper and stamped with an image of a face. On one side, the beard is a superfluous burden. On the other, the Russian imperial seal. Some historians still argue whether the token's design was satire or propaganda, but either way, it wasn't winning hearts. Not that Peter cared. He had a vision, and beards weren't it. The goal? Modernize Russia. Yank it kicking and screaming into the rational, progressive light of the Enlightenment, even if it meant personally attacking people's chins. Of course, facial hair wasn't just hair. In Russia, it symbolized piety. The Orthodox Church taught that beards were sacred. Shaving was vanity. Worse, it was heresy. To chop off your beard was to spit in the eye of tradition, family, and God himself. You walk past a chapel now, a little one with sagging wooden beams and the warm smell of wax. Inside, a priest stares out the window, stroking his beard like it's a relic. His eyes are wet. He knows what's coming. The crackdown doesn't come softly. Peter's guards are ordered to enforce the tax. And if someone refuses, they get shaved. Publicly, sometimes violently. Imagine a bearded merchant dragged from his shop, flailing, his beard hacked off like some sort of hairy amputation. There's one recorded case where a tax enforcer tried to shave a man mid-market, only for the crowd to erupt in protest. Shoes flew. Someone threw a chicken. The man escaped, beard intact, but he was later fined 3 times over. And you? You're still walking, still feeling the tension in the air. Around every corner. Another alley opens onto whispers. Did you hear? They shaved the whole monastery in Kostroma. My uncle's hiding his beard in a bread oven. They say Peter shaved his own cousin. Some of that is gossip. Some of it is true. Historians still argue whether Peter's reforms were for the good of Russia or simply the whims of a control freak. But tonight, you just feel the quiet tremble of an empire in transition. And in a small shop tucked behind an apothecary, you see something odd. A box. Inside, tufts of beard hair. Labeled, preserved, priced. People are buying their neighbors' shorn beards as keepsakes. One man's trauma is another man's collectible, apparently. And then there's the little boy you pass in the next street over, maybe 6 years old. His father just got shaved in public. The boy's trying to glue the clippings back onto his dad's face with wax. It doesn't work, but the look in his eyes tells you the story isn't over. You duck into a crooked alley where the snow's been trodden into a thick, gray slush. The smell of horse dung mingles with wood smoke and something else, anger. Quiet, stewing anger. You can feel it like an itch under your skin. Around you, the city of Moscow is transforming. Brick by reluctant brick. But its people, not so much. Especially the merchants. These are the men with the money, the pride, and the thickest, most ornate beards you've ever seen. It's not just facial hair, it's identity. It's status. Some of these men braid gold into their beards. Others keep them perfumed, oiled, and trimmed into impressive fans that wave ever so slightly in the wind like slow-motion battle flags. And now, they're furious. Peter's beard tax hits them first and hardest. Not because it's expensive, though for the record it is. It's more because it treats their dignity like a seasonal fashion trend. You want to keep your religious pride, your patriarchal symbol of wisdom and age. That'll be 100 rubles, thank you very much. Please present your token to the guard. You pass one merchant in a doorway, gripping the edge of a wooden cart. His beard's been shaved badly. Red patches show beneath the skin like old wounds. He spits into the snow as you pass. He thinks we're fools, he mutters, not even looking at you. He thinks we're French. That's the thing. The westernization effort isn't just about facial hair. It's about everything. Peter's forcing his nobles to wear European coats, speak foreign languages, adopt courtly manners. Historians still argue whether Peter admired Europe or envied it, but he clearly wanted Russia to stop being the scruffy, stubborn cousin at the royal table. Problem is, most of Russia didn't ask for that makeover. And if you shave a man's beard and tell him it's for his own good, don't be shocked when he considers stabbing you with a pitchfork. The Orthodox Church, meanwhile, is practically vibrating with fury. To them, this isn't just cosmetic, it's cosmic. Church fathers preach that the beard is sacred, part of the natural order, bestowed by God himself. Shaving it off? You might as well gouge your eyes out for fashion. You peek inside a small stone chapel. There's an icon of Christ, solemn and bearded. The priest nearby catches your eye and leans in close. They want us to look like demons, he whispers. Smooth-faced devils. Like little women. Okay, yikes. Misogynistic undertones aside. It's clear that the beard isn't just a cultural relic. It's theological. And Peter's campaign against it feels, to many, like a direct attack on orthodoxy itself. Word spreads quickly. In the countryside, rumors swell like sourdough. They say Peter's making deals with the Pope. They say he's not the real Tsar. That he's an imposter sent from hell, or worse, a German. That one gets legs. People start calling him the Antichrist. That escalates quickly. And out in the rural villages, where literacy is a luxury and paranoia is cheap, these whispers catch fire. Entire towns start stockpiling axes, ropes, and righteous fury. You stumble across one such gathering, a group of farmers, faces long and hairy, pacing in a frozen field. One clutches a crude drawing of Peter with devil horns. He cuts off the beard, says one man, waving the drawing, and soon he'll cut off our souls. A bit melodramatic. Sure, but not entirely unjustified. The reforms aren't stopping at shaving. Peter wants more. More change. More control. He even restructures the calendar, starting the year on January 1st instead of September. Madness. Next, he'll be telling people to eat with forks. Oh wait, he already did. You remember a weird tidbit you heard in passing. Peter once threatened to execute anyone who refused to use a fork at state banquets. Historians still argue whether he followed through or just liked the theatrics. But back to the beard rebellion bubbling under the surface. In towns like Uglich and Kostroma, priests begin hiding bearded parishioners in cellars. They call it a holy refuge. You crawl through one such hidden tunnel now, ducking beneath low beams. There's a man snoring softly in a hay pile, beard tangled like ivy. His eyes flutter open. Are the guards gone? he asks, voice hoarse. You shake your head. He curls back into the straw. These small acts of resistance don't make the news. They're not headline-worthy, but they form the slow, rumbling drumbeat of what's to come. Resentment turned real. Meanwhile, Peter? He's doubling down. He introduces stiff fines for anyone impersonating a noble to avoid the tax. And get this, even the lower classes, peasants, tradesmen, aren't exempt. They pay less, sure, but they still pay. And if they can't afford it, well, off comes the beard. You spot one per soul in a tavern now, rubbing his bare chin like he's trying to summon it back. His friends tease him lightly, but you can tell he's humiliated. One offers him a fake beard made of horsehair. Laughter erupts. The man throws it into the fire. Some begin crafting beard wigs. No, seriously, artificial beards made of string, fur, or yarn, worn under the chin and tied behind the ears like a theatrical mask. You pass a market stall selling them now, right between the radishes and roasted fish. A woman lifts one delicately and asks, "Does this come in martyr red?" You don't laugh, but your eyes crinkle. By this point, the tokens, those little discs of metallic obedience, have become black market currency. Some forge them, others steal them. One prankster you overhear claims he swapped his friend's token with a washer. The friend spent a week in prison before the guards realized he'd paid his tax, just not with government-issued metal. The paranoia rises. At border crossings, travelers are searched not for weapons, but for whiskers. Customs agents pull at chins, demanding proof of tax. At one gate, a man gets flagged because his beard is too suspiciously full. They shave him and fine him anyway. You don't know whether to laugh or cry. Even in the army, where Peter hopes for loyalty, murmurs begin to grow. Officers complain in private. A few desert. One corporal writes a poem, sarcastic and biting, better be shaved than be saved. He disappears soon after. That might be coincidence. Or not. Peter begins to lose sleep. And when Peter doesn't sleep, people bleed. He drafts stricter edicts. He places more trust in secret police. He even considers taxing mustaches just to make a point. The merchants are plotting. The church is seething. The peasants are whispering. And you feel the ground shift under your feet like a bear stirring in hibernation. It's not a full rebellion yet, but it's coming. You walk past another shaving post, this one splashed with frozen blood. You wonder if it was from the beard or the man beneath it. You trudge across the wet cobbles of St. Petersburg, Peter's glittering pet project, his half-finished city carved out of swampland and stubbornness. It's new, raw, and already sinking in places. But Peter doesn't care. He's determined to mold it into his window to the west. But tonight, it doesn't feel like a city of grandeur. It feels like a drafty dressing room, where everyone's being forced into new outfits they didn't choose. You hear it in the boots clomping over planks that haven't dried yet. See it in the furrowed brows of guards adjusting stiff. Western-style jackets that don't quite fit their broad Russian shoulders. Smell it in the air, a mix of damp wood, burning coal, and reluctant modernity. At the heart of all this is Peter, of course. 6 feet 8 inches of raw ambition. He's not ruling from a gilded palace like the tsars before him. He's out walking among the workers, sleeves rolled, hands stained with tar. Part czar, part foreman, part lunatic. And he's obsessed with order, with change, and with getting rid of what he calls old foolishness. Like beards. But as the city rises, wooden scaffolds clawing toward the sky like skeletal fingers, so does resistance. You hear whispers in the night, carried on wind that whistles through the unfinished buildings. They say the Tsar sleeps in a shack. They say he wrestles carpenters for fun. They say he drinks Dutch gin straight from the barrel. All true, more or less. One thing's certain, Peter doesn't rule like any Tsar before him. He's furious with inefficiency, allergic to ceremony, and strangely obsessed with dentistry. Seriously, he carries pliers on him at all times, pulling teeth from terrified courtiers under the guise of medicine, or perhaps just stress relief. Historians still argue whether this was symbolic behavior or just the world's worst hobby. You win through an alley of recently completed homes, freshly painted and too angular for Russian taste. Inside one, a minor noble weeps as a barber finishes scraping off the last remnants of his once regal beard. "They made me pay," he sobs. And then they shaved it anyway. A clerk nearby snorts. That's called a loyalty test. The real tragedy? This noble had a gold-plated beard token, the highest tier, granted by Peter himself. It should have protected him, but the barber says it looked a little too fake. The token, not the beard. Or maybe both. You don't ask too many questions. Elsewhere, a black market token ring is busted in the warehouse district. The forgers, all teenage boys, claimed they were only practicing engraving. Peter orders their thumbs broken as a warning. The message is clear: fake your loyalty, and you'll pay with more than rubles. And now comes the weird part. You spot it first in the markets, tiny portraits of saints with no beards. People gasp, crossing themselves. A woman faints. Turns out, Peter ordered new icons commissioned by Western-style painters who, accidentally or not, rendered the apostles clean-shaven. That does not go over well. Priests are summoned. Some scream. One bites his own hand. A few threaten to resign, which in Orthodox terms is like declaring war. Church authorities beg Peter to reconsider. He responds with silence and more taxes. Some monks retreat into the forests, forming hidden sections. These aren't your typical hermits, either. These are zealous, grim-eyed rebels. They call themselves the Beard Keepers. You follow one trail deep into the pines until you find a hollowed-out barn lit with tallow candles. The leader, Father Dimitri, has a beard down to his chest and eyes that haven't blinked in 20 seconds. "We guard what was never ours," he says cryptically. "The hair is not vanity. It is memory." You nod slowly. You don't want to get stabbed. Meanwhile, in St. Petersburg proper, nobles are getting creative. Some glue small tufts of fur beneath their noses, mustache patches. Others wear veils to disguise the stubble. One man is caught with a squirrel pelt sewn into his collar to mimic whiskers. You've never seen a sadder attempt at defiance. The guards aren't amused. They start issuing fines for mockery of decree. A new law Peter passes after hearing someone whistle "Ode to a Beard" outside his window. The satire is spreading. That's dangerous. You see it in the taverns, where plays are performed in secret cellars. Actors take the stage in exaggerated wigs and robes, mocking Peter's Western ways. One skit features a man being shaved so clean that his head disappears entirely, only his eyes and mouth remain. The audience laughs, but not too loud, because Peter has spies everywhere. And now, the unthinkable, even Peter's own family is caught in the crossfire. You stumble into a domestic argument late one evening, echoing from behind a thick wooden door in the palace quarter. It's Peter's half-sister, Sophia, once a regent, now under surveillance. She's shouting at a servant about the devil's razor and foreign witches. Turns out, she's refused to shave her ladies-in-waiting's heads, which Peter insisted would make them more orderly. Her protest: hair is a woman's virtue, a man's beard even more so. Peter responds by cutting off her salon's funding and doubling her surveillance. A message wrapped in punishment, like a gift from someone who's never celebrated a holiday. And now, the merchants begin to organize, not openly, but with coded signals. A braid of string left on a doorstep, a black feather pinned to a coat. If you know what to look for, it's everywhere. You hear rumors of a secret council forming outside Moscow. Traders, clerics, even minor boyars. They call it the Brotherhood of the Beard. What do they want? To restore tradition, to slow the madness, or, if necessary, to push Peter out. Historians still argue whether the Brotherhood ever had real plans for a coup, or if they were just dramatic beards in basements, but the paranoia it caused was very real. Peter hears about it. Of course, he always does. And he responds the way he always responds, with more pressure. He arrests 5 prominent merchants in one night. One confesses after 3 hours. The others are never seen again. You pass the city's wall the next morning. There's something new hanging from the gate. Not bodies, but beards. Shorn, blood-streaked. Nailed to the wood like trophies. No one says a word. You notice something else, too. The guards have started shaving each other, not just the people. Maybe out of loyalty. Maybe out of fear. Or maybe they're just too tired to argue anymore. One mutters to another. If the Tsar wants us bald from the eyebrows down, I say fine. As long as he doesn't touch my cabbage soup. A weak chuckle. But there's no joy in it. You wander toward the river as the sun rises. Ice glitters like shattered glass. Smoke drifts upward from chimneys, and somewhere behind it all, Peter is sketching new city plans with ink-stained fingers, muttering about clean lines and civilized nations. But beneath that quiet, beneath the construction and reform, you hear something growing. A rumble, a warning, a whiskered heartbeat getting louder. You wake to the sharp crack of hammers and the groan of newly laid timber stretching under the sun. Peter's capital is rising fast, too fast, some say. St. Petersburg is growing like a weed in marshland, and like any weed, it's not asking permission. Neither is Peter. By now, everyone's heard of the beard tax, and everyone is talking about it, even if they whisper. But today, something has changed. You see it in the baker's eyes as he shuffles loaves onto a shelf. His cheeks clean-shaven, but his mood far from light. You feel it in the way soldiers walk. Stiff-backed, watchful, swords clanking with extra purpose. The city feels like it's holding its breath. And then the news breaks. There's been a riot. Not in St. Petersburg, but in Uglich, a small, deeply orthodox town that has no patience for Peter's reforms. The rumors come quickly, mixed with exaggeration and panic. They say a monk slapped a tax collector with a wooden cross, that a farmer poured boiling kvass on an officer's boots, that a group of teenage apprentices barricaded the monastery gates with hay bales and pitchforks. Historians still argue whether this was an actual uprising or just a wildly overblown fistfight in a muddy square. But Peter doesn't wait for clarification. He sends troops. You follow the detachment, about 60 soldiers, all grim-faced and freshly shaven. They arrive by river barge, stepping onto the banks with rifles slung and orders sealed. No one greets them. The town's main street is empty, save for one dog licking a frozen cabbage. The troops fan out. Doors are kicked open. Beards are grabbed. Some are forcibly cut on the spot. The barbers come later, armed with razors and little wooden boxes for the confiscated whiskers. You watch as a small child clutches a doll with a drawn-on beard, her father's face, remembered in crayon and cloth. One soldier hesitates, then turns away. Back in the city, the mood grows darker. Peter begins issuing new edicts almost weekly. Nobles must now wear Western coats, complete with stiff collars and buttons no one knows how to fasten. Anyone caught in traditional robes, kaftans, is fined or sent to sweep the docks. And the beard police? They get a name. The Razorniki. It sounds almost comical, but they are not. These are elite enforcers trained to spot stubble from 30 paces. You see them striding through markets, flicking metal tokens with gloved fingers, demanding proof of payment and pointing at faces like art critics at an avant-garde exhibit. You trail one patrol. They stop an old man selling fish by the Neva. His beard is modest, snowy, and very real. He proudly shows his token, bronze, well-worn, with Peter's grim face stamped right in the center. The Razornik nods and walks away, but 20 minutes later, that same man is arrested. Turns out his token was valid, but from last year. You hear him yelling as they drag him away, voice cracking with fury. I paid my rubles. I earned this face. You think about that, earning your face, paying to keep your identity. This isn't just a tax anymore. It's a battle over the mirror. Soon, new rumors reach your ears. In the northern provinces, peasant women are refusing to marry clean-shaven men. They say beardless faces are like eggs, smooth, pale, and weak. One matchmaker reportedly wept during a formal introduction. He has no beard, she moaned. How do I know he's not a boy? Folk songs start changing too. Old ballads praising warriors with whiskers proud and fierce as wolves are quietly replaced. You hear one sung in a tavern about a man who loses his love because he shaved to please the Tsar. The last line stings, and now I am bare, both chin and heart. Peter? He doubles down. He builds a new building, small, windowless, and painted the color of rust. No one knows its purpose at first. Then the signs go up, Imperial Registry of Facial Hair. Yes, it's real. And yes, you're now expected to register your style from Imperial Curl to Monk's Crescent. Historians still argue whether Peter ever looked at these records himself or if it was just another layer of psychological warfare. And now, you notice something else. People begin hiding their tokens. At first, they were worn proudly, hanging from cords, polished until they gleamed. But now, you see them tucked into boots, sewn into hats, even baked into loaves of bread. Not because people are ashamed, but because owning a beard token is starting to feel like resistance. You remember the Brotherhood of the Beard, that underground network. Their symbols grow bolder. What began as coded gestures, braids and black feathers, has evolved. Now it's graffiti. You see it etched into stones near the docks, painted on barn doors outside Moscow. A simple image, easy to miss. Just a downward-pointing triangle with 3 wavy lines inside. The beard sigil. People nod when they see it. Some smile. Some cross themselves. A few just walk a little faster, like the ground beneath them has become unsteady. One day, near a market, you watch a young boy scrawl the beard sigil on a wall using crushed berries. A guard sees. He chases the boy down, grabs him by the collar, and raises his hand. And then freezes. Because the boy? He's wearing the uniform of a page boy from one of Peter's own ministries. Worse still, his father is a mid-level official. The guard hesitates, and that's all it takes. The boy breaks free, disappears into the crowd, and just like that, the symbol spreads. You start seeing it on playing cards, carved into church pews, sewn into shawls. It's become more than a protest. It's folklore. And Peter hates folklore, so he tries to overwrite it. He commissions a series of children's books, yes, really depicting bearded men as lazy, foolish, or evil. One tale features old Baba Bristle, a whiskered sorcerer who tricks children into eating mud pies. Another shows a wise czar who shaves his beard and immediately invents arithmetic. The books bomb. No one wants bedtime stories where the hero looks like a naked mole rat. You pass a classroom one day. A child is reading aloud from one of these tales. His voice is flat, his eyes glazed. The teacher sighs. Outside, older students are carving the beard sigil into the fence. You know what this means. This isn't just about taxes anymore. It's not even about beards. It's about control. About identity. About whether a ruler can sand down centuries of culture with razors and paintbrushes and still expect the people to smile back. And under that, a scarier question is forming, whispered at night behind closed shutters, in the safety of kitchens and cellars. Peter can take our faces. What else can he take? You find yourself walking deeper into the heart of this strange, beardless Russia, where every street corner hums with quiet rebellion, and every reflection in a window feels suspiciously smooth. The question now isn't whether Peter's beard tax was strange. It's whether it worked. And for that, you have to look beyond just the mirrors. You pass a tailor's shop where the bolts of fabric are rich, imported, and reeking of newness. The tailor's shears click-clack over thick French wool, carving the latest Western styles into stiff silhouettes. But look closer, underneath the racks of powdered wigs and velvet breeches, there's a hidden drawer, and in it, a row of fake beards. Real hair. Real pride. Illegal, technically. But technically has never stopped anyone in Russia. That's the paradox you begin to notice while Peter's laws grow more rigid. The people grow more creative. And if you think beard smuggling isn't real, think again. There's a whole shadow economy now. Traders sneak bundles of false beards across provincial borders like contraband tobacco. Priests hide clippers and Bibles. One merchant famously trains his dog to bark twice if a razor nick is nearby. Historians still argue whether these underground movements were coordinated or simply spontaneous eruptions of cultural resistance. But the effect, undeniable. A new culture begins to form, one where rebellion wears a mustache. Meanwhile, Peter, he's not just focused on beards anymore. His westernization agenda stretches like a spiderweb, each strand sticky with reform. He abolishes traditional Russian months, replaces the Orthodox calendar, orders that nobles dance at court, yes, dance. Imagine a boyar, centuries of Stoic tradition behind him, now awkwardly twirling to a minuet while trying to keep his wig from sliding off. It's like watching a grizzly bear learn ballet. But make no mistake, it's working. Slowly, painfully, Peter is reshaping the identity of the elite. At least on the outside. You find yourself at one of Peter's infamous assembly gatherings. These are mandatory social events, a kind of courtly punishment disguised as entertainment. You stand in the candlelit hall, watching nobles sweat under tight collars and foreign perfume, their stiff wigs barely concealing their discomfort. It smells like powder and nerves. A man approaches, a prince maybe, though he looks more like a scolded goat in Dutch shoes. He leans in, whispers behind his fan, "They made me shave during Lent. My own mother won't speak to me." Then he walks away. That's the vibe of these parties, mandatory cheer, seasonal trauma. One court artist paints a portrait of Peter, presenting him as a Roman emperor bare-chinned, surrounded by books and globes. But the painter hides a joke in the frame, a tiny, painted mouse under the emperor's throne, sporting a full and glorious beard. Peter doesn't notice, but the artist laughs for weeks. You visit a monastery next. Cold stone, candlelight, and silence. Here, the air still smells of beeswax and ink. Monks with uncut beards pass like ghosts, careful and quiet. This is one of the few places where beards are still allowed, barely. Peter had originally tried to tax even monks, but quickly realized that shaving sacred men wasn't just unpopular, it was asking for spiritual war. Still, his reforms reached them in subtler ways. Their robes are now regulated, their processions shortened, their sermons are monitored, and the monastery's printing press, once used for copying illuminated gospels, is now required to print government-approved religious texts. You watch one monk clutch a sheaf of Peter's reforms with trembling fingers, muttering prayers over the margins like he's exorcising the ink. Yet beneath the solemn quiet, something else stirs. In the scriptorium, you find a tiny note tucked between pages of psalms. Just a few words. A face cannot be taxed. A soul cannot be shaved. No signature. Just ink, defiance, and the knowledge that someone still believes. And then there's the aristocracy, the boyars. Once rulers in their own right, now they're scrambling to follow fashion orders from a czar who builds ships and measures skulls. You ride in a carriage with one, Count Mikhail, a man who once presided over 3 provinces and now spends his mornings brushing his wig and practicing French phrases. He gestures to his smooth chin with a sigh. I used to be feared, he mutters. Now my barber calls me sweetheart. He tells you something chilling. Many nobles now carry 2 faces. One public, Western, clean, obedient, and one private, steeped in old ways, hidden behind closed doors, whispered in candlelight. His wife still wears her traditional sarafan when no one's looking. His servants still bless the door with salt. And sometimes, when he's drunk, he puts on a fake beard just to feel like himself. Back in the capital, Peter opens his new civil registry. Every man must list his profession, his birthplace, his beard status. You can't decide if it feels more like census taking or confession. You flip through one record book, page after page of names, marks, measurements. Next to beard, the options are chillingly bureaucratic. None, light, heavy, refused shaving, penalized. A whole section is labeled resistors. Their names are underlined in red. Peter doesn't stop there. He commissions mechanical barbers, yes, prototypes for automated razors powered by foot pedals and gears. Most of them fail hilariously. One test subject ends up with only half his beard gone. Another walks out with his eyebrows shaved by mistake. Still, the symbolism is clear. The state wants to automate obedience. Meanwhile, beard tokens get a redesign. The new ones are silver, more detailed. They show Peter in profile, his chin gloriously bare, and underneath, the inscription "Cleanliness is obedience." But something strange happens. People start wearing the old bronze tokens as pendants, openly, defiantly. They become relics, a symbol of the pre-reform self. You see one worn by a tavern singer, swinging from her neck as she belts out songs mocking the Tsar's fondness for German coats. When guards come to arrest her, the audience surrounds her in silence. No one moves. No one talks. The guards leave. Another day, you pass a puppet show. The children giggle as a tiny puppet czar tries to chase a bearded puppet through a maze of paper doors. Every time he gets close, the bearded puppet vanishes, reappearing with a new fake beard. In the final act, the puppet czar slips on shaving cream and falls into a pond. The kids cheer. The adults chuckle softly. Somewhere, a guard takes notes. Historians still debate whether Peter understood the scale of this cultural pushback or dismissed it as noise. What's certain is that while his policies reshaped institutions, they never quite reached the soul of the people. Because a beard isn't just hair. It's memory. It's ritual. It's warmth in winter and wisdom in old age. It's the scratch of your grandfather's chin, the silhouette in old woodcuts, the rhythm of prayer beads brushing through whiskers. And Peter, in his cold logic, tried to wipe it all clean with razors and rubles. But identity isn't so easily shaved. You wake slowly, bundled under thick woolen covers in the drafty upper room of a merchant's house in Moscow. The faint clatter of hooves echoes down the cobbled street below, and with it, laughter. Not loud, not joyful, but nervous, performative. You peek through a frost-laced window just in time to see a group of men walking past, all beardless, all finely dressed in Western coats that don't quite fit. One man's shirt collar is too tight. Another's sleeves are far too long. A stiff wind flips up someone's powdered wig, revealing dark, natural hair underneath, and the others snort with restrained amusement. That's when you realize Peter's reforms haven't just reshaped appearances. They've created an entire generation living in costume. Court, things are no different. Picture yourself now attending a masquerade ball hosted by one of Peter's closest allies, Prince Menshikov. Grand chandeliers glitter overhead and harpsichords trill delicate melodies. You drift through the silk-draped crowd, men in brocade waistcoats, women in corseted gowns, and realize almost no one is dancing. They're watching, copying each other's posture, whispering anxiously in Dutch or French. There's a man in the corner with a full beard, and for a moment, you blink, stunned. But then he turns and it's just clever shadowing. He smiles slyly, as if he knows what he almost made you believe. This is the theater of Peter's Russia. Historians still argue whether this performative westernization was genuine admiration or terrified mimicry. Likely it was both, because behind every laced boot and curled wig is the quiet pulse of confusion. What does it mean to be Russian now? To be noble? To be modern? You slip outside, down a quiet alley, and there's a different energy entirely. A group of old men sit around a small fire, roasting chestnuts in a dented pan. Their faces are solemn, all of them bearded. One wears a fur hat so matted with age it looks like it's been passed down for generations, and maybe it has. They don't speak much, but they nod at you with eyes that say everything. That say, we are still here. That's the thing about Peter's reforms. They move fast, but they don't always stick. Like frost on a window, they obscure rather than erase. In some towns, people invent games around the beard tax. Children make shaving sticks, small wooden blocks with blunt edges, and chase each other around pretending to collect taxes. In others, merchants start carving tiny bearded figurines and selling them as charms against misfortune. Superstition wrapped in silent protest. And then there's the church. You kneel on a stone floor beside a weeping grandmother, her hands trembling as she clutches a cross. A nearby priest reads from the Gospels, his voice low and strained. You notice he's shaved, begrudgingly, no doubt, and he avoids meeting the eyes of his flock. Why? Because Peter's reforms have split the Russian Orthodox Church like an axe through oak. The patriarch's beard may remain untouched, but the clergy under him, caught between God and Tsar. One bishop whispers to you as you pass, "They trim our beards so we may enter the kingdom of Europe." But what of the kingdom of heaven? That tension between spiritual and state power is a wound that festers throughout Peter's reign. And sometimes it bleeds. You ride northward now, wind biting at your cheeks, past snowy fields where peasants chop wood and sing songs about old kings with flowing beards. Songs that rhyme poorly, but hit hard. In one village, you find a group of women weaving a tapestry. When you look closer, you realize it depicts a man, tall, stern, clean-shaven, being chased by a bear with a beard. They giggle when you notice. One winks. Another says the bear is tradition. He always wins in the end. But not everyone is so lighthearted. You attend a small tribunal where a man stands accused of willful hairiness. He had refused to pay the beard tax for over 2 years and, worse still, had inspired others to do the same. His defense? God gave me my beard. Who is the czar to take it? He is sentenced to 10 lashes and a public shaving. But as they drag him to the platform, something happens. The crowd begins to hum. Not loudly, but enough. A slow, deep tone, like an Orthodox chant. And in that hum, you hear defiance. It spreads like wildfire. By the time the man's beard is cut, 50 others have begun humming too. The guards rush to break it up, but no one moves. No one speaks. The resistance is silent, immovable, and deeply Russian. Later, you sit with a tax collector, a tired man with ink-stained fingers and the smell of boiled cabbage permanently embedded in his coat. He tells you the worst part isn't collecting the fee. It's what comes after. He leans in close. They pay me with coins, he says, but they pay me with looks too. Looks that burn. I go home at night and scrub my face raw. That's the cost of enforcing Peter's vision: guilt, alienation, and an endless, bureaucratic paper trail. You begin to notice the wear, the cracks. In one provincial town, a governor receives instructions to host a Western-style fair. He tries. Truly, he imports Polish sausages, German wine, and even a troupe of Italian clowns. But nobody comes. The streets remain empty. Finally, the governor pays townsfolk to attend. They show up. They pretend to enjoy themselves. But the laughter is hollow. The clowns look nervous. And the sausages freeze in the cold. Later that night, the governor's mansion is painted with a single message in ash and soot. We don't want your West. But not all resistance is passive. You hear rumors, just whispers at first, of a sect forming in the woods outside Yaroslavl. Men and women fleeing the reforms, building secluded villages where beards are sacred and tradition is law. They call themselves Starovary, Old Believers, a movement born from Peter's push. You hike through thick forest, breath steaming, and come upon their camp. It's simple, quiet, but thriving. A woman offers you bread baked in an old clay oven. A child with hair down to his waist watches you curiously. An elder recites prayers in a dialect untouched by Peter's reforms. It feels like stepping back into time, before the razors, before the wigs, before the mirror told you who to be. Historians still debate how widespread these settlements were, but their legacy, it's lasting. Some will hide for generations. Some will be hunted. Some will survive into the 21st century. You return to the city changed. And just in time, Peter is building again. This time, it's not just palaces or shipyards. It's a city, a whole new capital, one that will have no memory of beards, of incense smoke, of old Russian stone. He calls it St. Petersburg. You feel a chill, not from the northern wind, but from the realization that Peter doesn't just want to shave beards. He wants to shave history. You stand ankle-deep in marshland. The reeds rise around you like prison bars, and the ground squelches with each hesitant step. Welcome to the delta of the Neva River, a place locals once avoided unless they were fishing or trying to disappear. Now it's a construction site, a furious, sprawling, mud-choked dream. You hear shouting in Dutch and German and Russian, the clang of hammers on stone, the whine of saws biting through damp timber. Slaves and soldiers alike bend beneath loads of quarried granite. Engineers bark orders from makeshift scaffolds. The whole place smells of wet earth, sweat, and iron. This is where Peter the Great will build his shining window to the west, St. Petersburg. But let's be clear, it's not a window. It's a wedge. A foreign knife Peter is driving into the ribcage of Mother Russia. And the people tasked with forging it, they're not exactly volunteers. Thousands of peasants are dragged north from every province under Peter's command. They die in droves of exposure, starvation, disease. The joke among survivors goes, every brick in Petersburg is mortared with a man's soul. Not quite the tourism slogan, is it? Historians still argue whether the city's death toll topped 100,000. Some say less, others say more. But no one argues about the brutality of the place in those early years, or the sheer madness of Peter's ambition. Because St. Petersburg is not a city, it's a declaration. You watch him now, pacing across a crude plank walkway that keeps his polished boots above the muck. He carries blueprints under one arm, and a scowl stitched deep into his brow. When something displeases him, a beam too crooked, a wall too short, he doesn't send for an overseer. He fixes it himself, sometimes with his own chisel, sometimes with his fists. Peter doesn't just dream of transformation, he embodies it, physically. A czar who drinks like a sailor, curses like a dockhand, and builds like a blacksmith. You trail him through the new city's rising bones, foundations for European-style palaces, canals patterned after Amsterdam, public squares shaped by French geometry, everything designed not to feel Russian. And that's the point. Even the city's name, a very un-Russian St. Petersburg, hints at Peter's internal calculus. It's not a tribute to himself, but to the Apostle Peter. Though, as some whisper, the irony is thick. A man building a city in his own image, while pretending it's about a saint. Still, resistance follows him here. You pass a group of bricklayers murmuring prayers in Old Church Slavonic as they lay foundation stones. Nearby, A noblewoman sobs quietly into her handkerchief, her estate confiscated to make room for urban planning. A few guards chuckle cruelly, but they don't intervene. They know grief is cheaper than rope. Some peasants carve tiny crosses into the wood frames of their homes, hoping to anchor something sacred before it's swallowed by this new world. But Peter isn't content with walls and bridges. You arrive at a strange public ceremony. A man is led to a platform, shaking with fear. He's not a criminal, at least not in the traditional sense. He's a noble who refused to move to Petersburg when summoned. His punishment, a forced relocation, and a compulsory Western haircut. You watch as a barber, flanked by soldiers, shears the man's traditional topknot in front of the crowd. The hair falls in soft tufts like feathers ripped from a bird. The onlookers gasp and some look away. You don't. You meet the man's eyes and see something terrifying. Not humiliation. Hatred. You begin to understand Peter's beard tax was only the beginning. Now it's identity itself that's under siege. Dress, language, customs, geography, even architecture, all warped to fit Peter's vision. The nobles grumble but comply. They don't have much choice, because the new court is here now. Whether they like it or not, you slip into one of the grand reception halls, just completed, still smelling of plaster and imported pine. Candlelight dances across gilded mirrors. The walls are crowded with portraits, Dutch masters, Flemish landscapes. No icons, no saints, just wealth, just power. You see Peter at the far end, towering over a line of diplomats. He laughs, loud, sudden jarring. A German ambassador misquotes a Latin proverb and Peter corrects him with perfect pronunciation. Then he downs a goblet of vodka in one go and challenges the man to an arm wrestling match. Everyone applauds. No one breathes. Later, a rumor drifts through the court like pipe smoke. Peter's planning to outlaw traditional Russian dress altogether in the capital. No more kaftans. No more boots curled at the toe. Only European suits and military uniforms. At first, you think it's gossip, but then the tailors arrive. Caravans from Paris, Vienna, Stockholm. They bring bolts of fabric that shimmer like fish scales. Cut patterns so narrow the Russian nobles gasp. How can a man breathe in this? One asks. Peter answers by wearing it himself. He struts into court with satin sleeves and polished buckles, his beard long gone, his posture stiff with pride. Everyone stares, and then, one by one, they imitate, because imitation is safer than execution. Historians still argue whether this period marked a true modernization or a forced cosplay, but you don't need a textbook to feel the tension. You sit on the banks of the Neva as winter descends, watching the new city take shape like ice forming on a pond, slow, jagged, irreversible. Behind you, a group of laborers sings a dirge. The lyrics are about home. Real home. The village. The onion-domed church. The beard their father once braided before going off to war. One line catches your ear. They took our faces and gave us masks. It stays with you, especially when you pass a bakery and see a fresh sign that reads, "Beards discouraged. Modern patrons welcome." You step inside and the bread is stale, but the owner's smile is sharp. That night, you walk through the city's central square, trying to map its geometry in your head. The angles are too clean, the buildings too precise. It feels like a set built for a play no one rehearsed. And in the wind, you hear something else. A whisper from the old world, from the forest, from the churches, from the black soil of the south. It says, "This will not hold forever, but for now it does." Peter watches from his palace window. The snow glitters, the rivers freeze. The city rises. And the beards? The beards are waiting. Snow keeps falling. By now, it's layered thick on rooftops, frozen into the canals, muffling the sounds of saws and hammers, like a wool blanket pulled over the city's fever. But St. Petersburg keeps rising, unbothered by frostbite, famine, or the whispers from Moscow. You wander a narrow street flanked by stone facades, new, gray, faceless. The buildings here are like obedient children, neat, silent, disciplined. But that doesn't stop the murmurs from oozing through their cracks. You slip into a tavern with low ceilings and high tension. Inside, men huddle around wooden tables, their breath visible in the frigid air. They speak low, but you catch a word that chills you more than the wind outside: rascal. It means schism, and it's not just about religion anymore. Once, the Raskolniki old believers were simply devout conservatives resisting liturgical reforms. But now, they're a growing undercurrent of discontent. Religious resistance is being braided together with cultural defiance. If Peter is the tsunami of change, the old believers are the heavy stones buried beneath the sand, unmoved, unmoving. You sit down and listen as one bearded man tells the others, first they took our icons, then our crosses. Now they take our beards. What's next? Our God. It sounds dramatic, until you remember Peter's men recently stormed several rural monasteries, shaving monks by force, replacing candlelit chants with military drills. Historians still argue whether Peter's suppression of the old believers was political, religious, or just manic authoritarianism. But for the people inside this tavern, there's no debate. To them, it's all spiritual warfare. You watch as one man passes around a tiny object wrapped in cloth. When he uncovers it, you lean closer. It's a beard. Well, not a real one. A false beard. Made of woven horsehair, dyed a smoky brown, styled in the traditional forked style of the Russian peasantry. It even has a little leather thong to tie it under the chin. The others nod gravely, taking turns trying it on, their faces solemn and surreal. One man even crosses himself, not out of mockery, but reverence. This, you realize, is where the revolution begins. Not with swords, with symbols, with men who risk everything to wear fake beards in secret. Later that night, you find yourself in a remote village outside Petersburg. Here, things look familiar. Wooden huts, ox-drawn carts, smoke curling from chimney stacks and thick, fragrant ropes. But the people? They're on edge. You approach a small chapel, its iconostasis intact, the walls heavy with incense. An elder priest pulls you aside. He's bald, strangely, and he keeps glancing at the road outside. You ask what he's waiting for. He mutters, "Inspectors." Apparently, Peter's government has dispatched patrols, modernity agents, if you like, to ensure people are complying with reforms. They enter homes without warning, measure coat lengths, confiscate religious items, snip off beards with dull shears while quoting Western philosophy. You feel the air change when a pair of riders arrive, swords at their hips, papers in their hands. The village holds its breath. One man tries to flee, but slips on ice and is dragged back by the beard. The priest whispers, this is how revolts begin, from cuts made not with blades, but with shame. And indeed, something stirs. In the forests beyond the village, you encounter a group of exiles. Bearded, cloaked, living in hidden camps, praying in secret. They call themselves the True-Faced. They refuse the tax, refuse the city, refuse Peter. They tell stories of arrests, of families torn apart. One man, eyes watery from the smoke of his campfire, describes watching his father beaten for refusing to pay the beard tax. He said his beard was grown in the image of God, and they beat him like an animal. That was the day I became a rebel. You begin to see, this isn't about facial hair anymore. It's about the right to define what it means to be Russian. And Peter? He's not Russian enough for them. Back in Petersburg, Peter holds court again. Tonight's entertainment, a beard-burning ceremony. Guards drag in a wheelbarrow piled high with severed beards, real and fake, and set them ablaze in the central square. A bonfire of follicles, the scent acrid and ceremonial. Peter watches with arms folded. Then he orders the musicians to play something French. The nobles clap along, eyes darting to the flames, not daring to blink. But behind them, a page boy sobs. His father's beard is in that pile. You leave the square quickly, your chest tight. Later, in a nobleman's parlor, you overhear a whispered debate. Is it better, one asks, to pretend you've changed or to die for staying the same? The others don't answer. Historians still argue whether Peter's beard policy was merely symbolic or a masterstroke of psychological warfare, by targeting something as visible, as sacred, and as personal as the beard. Peter ensured compliance wasn't just public, it was painfully intimate. You're beginning to see why the resistance spreads like wildfire. In the south, Cossack strongholds refuse to obey the tax. Some shave begrudgingly, but others rebel openly. A rogue captain, once loyal to Peter, now preaches beard rights as divine law. In one town, locals erect a wooden idol of Father Beard, a patron spirit of facial freedom, and leave offerings of wax and wool. Fringe tidbit of the night. Some rebels reportedly smeared sheep fat on their chins to simulate the sheen of bearded skin. One poor fellow was licked raw by dogs. In Moscow, riots break out near markets and churches. First, they're small scuffles, fistfights, but they swell. A monastery is torched by Peter's forces, and overnight it becomes a shrine of martyrdom. People whisper that saints appeared in the smoke, their beards glowing gold. It's enough to keep a myth alive. You drift now through the dreamscape of a changing country, where identity is under siege, where to wear a beard is to court suspicion, where children ask their fathers why God made them hairy if Peter finds it offensive, where something as simple as a whisker can become an act of defiance. And then you arrive at a surprising location, Peter's own chambers. He sits alone, map spread before him, a glass of vodka untouched at his elbow. He stares at a small object on his desk. A shaving razor, gold-handled, ornate. For a long moment, he doesn't move. Then he picks it up and cuts his thumb. Just a nick. He watches the blood bead, then wipes it on a parchment filled with tax data. You wonder if the beard tax bothers him even a little, if he understands what he's taken from his people. Probably not. But in the corner of his room, hidden behind a curtain, lies a strange object wrapped in cloth. A fake beard. Maybe, just maybe. You leave Peter's chamber quietly. The image of that fake beard behind the curtain clinging to your mind like fog on a frosted window. It's a strange thought, Peter the Great, Emperor of Progress, harboring even the faintest flicker of nostalgia. Maybe he's not as immune to the past as he pretends, but outside his walls, nostalgia is turning into resistance. You head south now, where the river Volga snakes like a black ribbon through the countryside. Along its banks, the murmurs have grown louder. Small towns, tightly knit and deeply religious, are becoming hotbeds of subtle but spreading defiance. In one, you see it firsthand. A merchant, heavy-set and proud, walks openly through the market square with a thick, flowing beard that ripples in the breeze like a banner. He's flanked by two sons, bearded, too, and defiant. When a tax inspector approaches, they say nothing. They don't run. They just stand, silent, solid. The inspector falters. He's alone, and the townsfolk are watching from doorways and windows. No one speaks, but no one looks away. The inspector turns and leaves, and someone begins to hum an old hymn, low, steady. Others join. It fills the street, and for a moment you feel it. Unity built on bristles. In cities, people stage quiet protests. Men dye their beards gray and claim their religious elders exempt from the tax. In one absurd case, a group of students invents a fictional monastic order, the Order of the Golden Whisker, complete with robes and fake Latin chants. They shave their heads but glue tiny tufts under their chins. When questioned, they argue it's not technically a beard, but a chin adornment of spiritual significance. It's ridiculous. It's genius. Historians still debate how widespread these little rebellions were. Some say they were isolated sparks. Others believe they formed an underground network of communication, resistance by rumor. Either way, Peter's reforms begin to encounter friction. Not in the halls of government, but in the kitchens, in the bathhouses, in the pews. And then, in the strangest place of all, the theater. You attend a performance in Moscow, a new play imported from France, but adapted to Russian tastes. A satire, or maybe propaganda, or maybe both. The main character is a bearded fool, stubborn and slow, who refuses to shave and is eventually struck down by the angel of cleanliness, a powdered nobleman in a crisp blue uniform. The audience laughs, but it's nervous laughter. You can feel the divide in the room. One side sees progress, the other sees mockery. You overhear a noble whisper, "He reminds me of my uncle." He doesn't laugh again. Outside the theater, pamphlets are being handed out. Anonymous, seditious, clever. One reads, "First the beard, then the Bible, then the bones in your grave, Peter wants it all." The image shows a man shaved so clean his nose has vanished. Another shows Peter himself with a goat's beard, stomping on Orthodox crosses. You pocket a few. Later, by candlelight, you read them again. They're crude, but they strike deep. Out in the countryside, things are less theatrical, but more dangerous. You walk through a forest where the birch trees stand like ghostly sentinels. Smoke rises ahead, and you find a cluster of huts built into the earth. The people here have retreated from society entirely. Self-sufficient, pale, suspicious. They call themselves beard hermits. They tell you the cities are lost, That Peter is the Antichrist. That soon, the earth will be purged and only those with uncut beards will be spared. They show you a child no more than 9 already sprouting patchy facial hair. A miracle, they say. You're not sure whether to laugh or weep. One man speaks of a secret scripture he found buried beneath an old church. It claims beards are the ladder by which men ascend to heaven, each hair a rung. When he says this, the others nod like it's gospel. It's easy to dismiss these people as fringe zealots, but you can't deny the pattern. Everywhere you go, you find resistance blooming in strange corners. In songs, in riddles, in embroidery. One woman has stitched a scene into her wedding veil, Adam and Eve with matching beards, standing under a tree that looks suspiciously like Peter's palace. No one but her and her family will ever see it, but it's there. Quiet rebellion, woven with love and thread. Fringe tidbit. In one village, the local blacksmith starts crafting beard cages, metal lattices that allow men to tuck their beards inside and pass inspections by claiming they're prosthetic chin guards. It works for about a month. Then arrests begin. Peter's agents sweep through the provinces more aggressively now. Entire communities are uprooted. Churches are shuttered. One old believer monastery, known for harboring fugitives, is burned to the ground after a brutal standoff. You arrive days later. The snow is still black with soot. They bury the beards in a mass grave, someone tells you. Like martyrs. Peter, meanwhile, grows colder. You hear he's begun sending forged icons, Western-style paintings, into churches as replacements for traditional ones. Let them pray to these, he says, reportedly. At least they're clean. In secret, you speak with one of his former advisors, a man now exiled for ideological redundancy. He tells you Peter once asked whether Jesus himself would pay the beard tax. No one dared answer, the advisor whispers. But I saw his face. I think he hoped we'd say yes. That night, you dream of bearded saints descending from the clouds, armed not with swords, but razors. Each swipe removes sin or identity. You wake uneasy, and then news spreads of a letter. A fake one, or maybe real. Who knows? It's allegedly written by a peasant soldier on the front lines. It reads, I shaved to serve the Tsar. Now I have nothing left to give him. My beard was my strength. My wife does not know me. My child cries when I return. Tell Peter he has taken my soul. It circulates quickly, copied by hand, passed in secret. Some say the man was executed. Others say he never existed. But it doesn't matter. The story is too good, too painful. And stories, you're learning, are the true currency of this resistance. You spend a few nights in a small inn run by an elderly couple. He has no beard. She does. She jokes that between the two of them, at least one will reach heaven. But then she adds quietly, he still dreams of it. His beard. It used to curl in the wind like a banner. Now he only has the wind. That's the cost, isn't it? Not just hair, but identity, memory, dignity. Historians still debate how effective the beard tax truly was, whether it westernized Russia or just traumatized it. Whether Peter carved a modern state from stone, or simply shattered what was already sacred. You walk out into the snow once more, and a boy runs past, holding a puppet show. The puppets are all bearded. The villain? A bald man with gold buttons and a French accent. No one corrects him. Not anymore. You're walking now through a cold morning fog in a place that doesn't have a name on the maps anymore. Just a scattering of hovels and a chapel leaning slightly to one side, as if the earth beneath it grew tired of holding up faith. Inside the chapel, candles flicker over faces carved in centuries old with Jesus, the saints all adorned with flowing beards so fine they seem to ripple in the candlelight. An old priest, beard down to his sternum, speaks to a gathered dozen. He doesn't mention Peter by name. He doesn't have to. He talks instead about Samson, whose strength lived in his hair, and of the Nazarites forbidden from shaving. The message is clear: if you let your beard go, God lets you go. Outside, the air bites your face. It's early 1700s Russia, and belief like this still runs deeper than law. But that's where Peter is doubling down. You hear he's just passed another decree. Any man caught impersonating a religious exemption for the sake of keeping a beard can be jailed, fined, or forcibly tonsured. Some are now being sent to monasteries not to serve but to be broken, to live as examples, clean-shaven, silent, staring. You pass through a city checkpoint where a guard rubs his own chin thoughtfully. He's clean-shaven, but the stubble has started to return. Feels wrong, he mutters. Like my face is pretending to be someone else's. It's not just poor men whispering like this anymore. Nobles, those who once laughed in powdered wigs, are starting to question whether the cost of modernization is too steep. 1. A high-ranking courtier with a thick accent and slick European coat confides in you, I have studied in France, yes, but I did not cut off my tongue to learn their words. Why must I cut off my beard to serve my czar? Fringe tidbit. A strange rumor floats through the nobility that Peter is developing a beard police, a secret unit whose sole job is to investigate beard smugglers and underground barbershops. As ridiculous as it sounds, you later find out it's partially true. Not an official branch of government, perhaps, but certain loyalists have taken it upon themselves to report noncompliance. One is a woman who used to be a midwife and now keeps a running log of facial hair lengths in her district. You wonder if she ever looks in the mirror and wonders what she's become. Meanwhile, back in the capital, the backlash is starting to swirl in more dangerous directions. Artists and writers, careful ones, start including imagery of bearded angels in their works. On the surface, it's just religious symbolism, but everyone knows what's being said. One play, in particular, features a character who shaves and slowly loses the ability to recognize himself in the mirror. He speaks backwards. He forgets his children's names. The audience leaves in silence. Historians still argue whether this was intended as criticism of Peter or just existential musing. But either way, it rattles the elite. Peter hears about it, of course, and his reaction is complicated. You witness him during a rare public address. He talks about Europe, about how Russia must stand tall among giants. He tells a story about a German engineer he once met who claimed he could recognize a barbarian by his beard alone. Peter chuckles, but no one else does. He doesn't notice, or maybe he does and doesn't care. And then, the most surreal moment of the night, Peter lifts a glass, toasts to progress, and produces a false beard. Long, luscious, obviously fake. He puts it on. Laughter. Awkward, unsure, but contagious. But behind the beard, Peter's eyes stay cold. You leave the gathering with a stomach that doesn't settle. In the days that follow, you find yourself obsessing over a small village where something extraordinary happened. It wasn't a riot, not quite, just a refusal. A dozen men were lined up for tax collection. All were bearded. The inspector asked for payment. No one moved. He asked again. Stillness. He shouted. A dog barked. And then, without warning, the oldest man in the group took a single step forward, unsheathed a knife, and calmly, slowly cut off his own beard. You don't hear the sound, but you imagine it, like fabric tearing. Then he placed the beard in the inspector's hand and walked away. The others followed suit, each leaving their beard behind like a part of their soul offered not in submission but in protest. A month later, the inspector was found dead, slumped over his desk. No signs of violence, but his mouth was full of beard hair. Whether true or myth, the tale spreads fast. You arrive in another town where the local pub has renamed itself the Whiskered Ghost. Above the door, a carved wooden sign shows a translucent, floating man with a glorious beard and wide, empty eyes. Inside, you hear new songs. One verse goes, he shaved our pride, he shaved our past, but still our shadows grow so fast. Everyone sings along, even the clean-shaven. The state can take your hair, but not your history. Later that week, you walk past a line of young recruits barely old enough to hold muskets. Their faces are clean, but they carry a strange tension like they're wearing skin too tight. One leans in and whispers to the boy next to him, when I'm dead, glue mine back on. You realize these aren't just quips. These are coping mechanisms. A way for the people to hold onto something, anything of what they were. There's talk now of desertion increasing in the outer provinces. Some blame the harsh military reforms, others the endless wars. But quietly, a few mention the beard tax. One general reportedly tells Peter, sir, we have men willing to die for you, but not to shave for you. Peter doesn't respond, at least not directly. Instead, a new edict appears. Every church must publicly display a beard ledger that lists men who've paid the tax and those who haven't. Non-compliance means confiscation of property, or worse. It's bureaucracy weaponized. Public shaming codified. And you? You find yourself in a room full of documents, flipping through name after name. There are little red marks next to some. Paid. Others are crossed out. Fled. A few are underlined 3 times. Suspect. You run your fingers over the ink. Some names feel familiar. Maybe you passed them on the road. Maybe one smiled at you. This isn't about grooming anymore. It never really was. It's about power, identity, control over the story a man tells with his face. And Peter, the storyteller-in-chief, is rewriting the plot line one whisker at a time. You're standing in a snow-laced alley, half-lit by torchlight, where whispers crawl up the brick walls like ivy. It's a cold January evening, and yet the streets of Yaroslavl are unusually crowded. Men keep their heads down, collars high, voices low. And it's not just the temperature that makes them shiver. A man steps beside you, bundled in furs, his face buried in shadows. He doesn't introduce himself, just mutters, "They shaved the bishop this morning, in front of the choir boys." You pause, because that sentence lands heavy. This isn't a drunk fisherman or conspiracy nut. He's dressed too well, carries himself too straight. He's seen things. And when he walks off, you notice a tuft of gray peeking from beneath his scarf, one last rebellious curl that somehow escaped the blade. Back in Moscow, stories like this are now common currency. You hear them in bakeries, in bathhouses, even in sermons. A town whose entire male population refused the razor and was fined triple. A monastery whose icon of a bearded Christ was mysteriously retouched by government artists. A man who cut off his beard, nailed it to his front door, and then vanished. It's not organized revolt yet, but it's starting to smell like one. The aristocracy is divided. Some are still proudly clean-shaven, walking like mannequins in Parisian silk. Others have begun to quietly question whether Peter's crusade for modernization is anything more than an imperial ego trip wrapped in foreign brocade. In court circles, to mention the beard question is now like invoking a ghost. And yet, the ghost walks beside everyone. Quirky tidbit time, a short-lived fashion spreads among noblewomen of wearing tiny fake beards as part of masquerade balls, like facial hair gone haute couture. A political jab wrapped in velvet and perfume. For a few weeks, the trend is all the rage. Peter, not amused, he bans the practice immediately, declares it a mockery of sovereign will. No one tries again. Historians still argue whether this signals the moment Peter felt control slipping, or whether it was simply a ruler drawing one more line in the sand. Either way, sand doesn't hold much under frost. You find yourself watching a government scribe at work, hunched over a desk, copying names from arrest warrants to execution ledgers. His fingers twitch when he writes tax evasion beard-related. He has a mustache, barely, and he keeps touching it between names, as though checking it's still there. His superior walks in and scolds him, not for the mustache, but for pausing. "You are not paid to reflect," the man growls. Meanwhile, in the countryside, tax agents have begun traveling with armed guards. One collector in Tver was chased into a river by villagers armed with ladles and axes. You stop in a town where an underground network has formed an informal alliance of priests, barbers, and peasants working together to falsify beard tax receipts. Some men are now wearing hollowed-out coins or trinkets embedded with hidden shavings of their own hair, like relics of defiance. There's even talk of a new prayer being whispered in secret. "May the blade pass over me, and not into me. Let my beard stand, even if I fall." It's not approved by any church, but it spreads anyway. Late one night, you sit by a fire with a retired soldier, grizzled, toothless, eyes like burnt coal. He tells you without looking up, Peter thinks he's carving statues out of men. But men aren't stone. We rot. We bleed, we remember. He then hands you a folded scrap of paper. It's a drawing, crude, smudged, but it's unmistakably Peter with devil horns and a pair of shears instead of a scepter. You ask if he's afraid of what would happen if someone saw him with it. He shrugs. "Only if they catch me before I die." The fire pops. Somewhere in the distance, and all hoots. They carry tiny metal boxes smaller than fists that open to reveal portable razors. If a man is found to be in violation, they're instructed to shave him on the spot. No trial, no receipt. Just scrape and go. They call it the whisker snatch. Even children are catching on. A school rhyme spreads. Shave and pay or run away. Peter's snips are here to stay. Hide your face and grow it slow, lest the beard men make it go. You wonder what Peter would think, hearing that in a classroom. But Peter isn't in a classroom. He's in his winter palace. Instead, They talk of civil friction, transitional pains, and orthodox resistance. Euphemisms stacked like kindling under a dry roof. And yet, Peter feels it. You see it in the way he paces. He started wearing gloves indoors. His beard, yes, even his carefully maintained, neatly trimmed one, looks thinner. Is it stress? Or has he finally shaved a little too much? No one dares ask. Back on the roads, you meet a merchant who sells beard wigs on the black market. He calls them holy falsies. They strap on like masks, made of horsehair, boar bristle, even the discarded clippings of executed dissenters. He grins through missing teeth and whispers, "You wouldn't believe who buys from me." He won't name names, but the coin he carries is imperial. One night, in a village tavern, you hear a toast to the beards that remain and the men who grew them twice. The glasses clink. You realize this is more than resistance now. You think of him often now as Russia starts to hold its breath. Something is coming. The sky is brittle with frost, and the roads crack like old bone beneath your boots as you cross the Volga again, this time south toward Nizhny Novgorod. The wind off the river bites harder here. A royal barber approaches with a blade so clean it catches the pale sunlight like glass. No one cheers. No one jeers. When the first lock of beard falls, an old woman crosses herself and turns away. You stand there watching the second lock fall and the third. When it's done, the man's face looks unfamiliar, even to himself. He doesn't blink, doesn't tremble, but something in his eyes suggests that the part of him they wanted to kill might not be his beard at all. You later learn he was a priest, denounced by one of his own parishioners, probably under pressure, probably to save himself. The system's cruelty lies not only in its punishments, but in how it teaches ordinary people to enforce them. This is how it spreads, like a rash or rot. You duck into a tavern later just to get warm, and there you overhear the whispers again. They're lower now, more careful, but the word uprising is finally being used. Quietly, cautiously, like a candle lit behind cupped palms. The merchants are furious. Their foreign business partners joke about Russia's weird war on whiskers, but deals are falling through. Several Orthodox guilds refuse to pay bribes anymore, claiming the state is no longer legitimate. Some towns won't even let Peter's tax agents enter without a formal escort, an unthinkable act of defiance just a few months ago. One merchant slams his tankard down and says, "Next it'll be our tongues taxed for speaking Russian." There's laughter, but it's a bitter, fraying kind. One kid has scratched into the wall of a bakery, better be Harry than Barry. Cheeky and chilling. In a cold stone chamber beneath a noble house, you watch as a secret meeting unfolds. Not to assassinate the Tsar, most still claim loyalty or pretend to, but to resist him. Through sabotage, through shelter, through silence. One man speaks up. The beard was never the issue. It was just the first thing he came for. And suddenly you understand. Historians still argue whether the uncut were real or just a colorful invention of post-revolutionary folklore. There's precious little evidence, just fragments in letters, vague arrest records, and references that vanish from documents after Peter's death. But in this moment, under this flickering lantern, you know you're seeing something that exists, if only in defiant breath and shared conviction. You travel east, deeper into peasant territory. There, resistance looks different, less organized, more spiritual. Local priests are beginning to call the beard the mark of divine flesh. One claims that a man who shaves risks losing his soul in the afterlife. And the fire is blamed on lightning. Problem is, there wasn't a cloud in the sky. You meet a runaway tax agent, not old, barely 20, hiding in a barn near Suzdal. He's declared that all clergy must be clean-shaven by the feast of St. Andrew or lose their positions. Dozens refuse. Some flee. A handful go into hiding, continuing to preach in forests or empty barns. The state calls them rebels. The people call them saints. You ride a sleigh through a narrow pass outside Tula and see something new. But for tonight, it burns, and the flames light the night with defiance. One young man turns to you and says, "They can take the beard from the face, but not from the heart." It's a little dramatic. It's a statue of a clean-shaven man holding a scroll of law in one hand and a compass in the other. A symbol, Peter declares, of the future man, rational, practical, civilized. No one dares boo. The beard was gone before dawn, but a ripple had passed through the city like wind over a field. By now, foreign diplomats are sending confused dispatches home. Russia is aflame. One writes, not from war or famine, but from the hairs of its own face. Another reports, the Tsar grows more severe by the day. I fear this beard affair has become less policy than obsession. And you? You just watch. You drift from town to town, face buried in scarf, hands always near your hood. Not to hide your beard, you don't have one, but to avoid the gaze of men looking for sympathy, for allies, for signs that they are not alone in this. And deep down, you wonder, was this ever just about beards? Or was it about who has the right to decide what a man must become? The snow has started to melt just a little, turning the cobblestones to slush and the air to something more like hope. You squint up at the sun, pale and flickering through the cloud banks. And for a moment you can almost believe this long winter of beardless dread might end. But then you turn a corner in Smolensk and see something strange. A procession, silent and stiff, but constant, like drips from a ceiling in a room you can't leave. One night, in a cramped bakery cellar, you meet a woman named Yevdokia. She's been printing illegal broadsheets on scraps of paper. Repurposed church bulletins, anything she can steal without drawing notice. Her press is made from an old cider barrel and a chicken coop. Her ink? Burnt beet juice mixed with ash. It's not high literature, but it spreads. Within weeks, versions of her words start cropping up across villages, scratched into barn doors, sewn into pillowcases, carved into the bark of trees. The phrase becomes a kind of ghost haunting the empire. And Yevdokia? She disappears one morning. No one sees her again. Some say she fled to Poland. Some say she was caught and thrown in the Neva. Face first. Historians still argue whether she even existed. But you saw her hands, stained black with ink. You smelled that weird beet concoction. You believe. As spring claws its way across the land, unrest blooms with the flowers. In Kazan, a group of Orthodox seminarians holds a public protest, beards hidden under theatrical masks. But the message clear: we are your future, and we will not be plucked. Soldiers shut it down fast. 3 students vanish. The rest are reassigned to monasteries on desolate islands. In Astrakhan, something bolder, a minor noble, Baron Mikhail Zaralov, sends an open letter to the Tsar. It's dripping with sarcasm. Since we are no longer trusted to govern the hairs on our own faces, perhaps we should surrender all matters of dress and diet to your majesty as well. I await your instruction on whether buckwheat may still be consumed on Tuesdays. You laugh aloud reading it. He takes the mirror and smashes it against the wall. They shave him anyway. Not long after, in a village near the Urals, you witness what looks like nothing at first, just a man refusing to open his door for the taxmen. But when they try to force it, others come. 5 men, then 10, then 20. Pitchforks, kitchen knives, hammers. No one dies, but the agents flee, their wagons overturned, their papers burned. The villagers call it the day of the bearded gate. You chuckle, but the empire doesn't. Within a week, the village is razed. Homes burned, fields salted, survivors relocated for re-education. It's the first time you've heard that phrase. You don't like it. Crowds gather to weep and shout at him. One old woman screams, "Blasphemer!" Another cries, "Visionary!" He is arrested the moment he reaches Red Square. By now, it's not just peasants and priests. It's bureaucrats, military officers. Even members of Peter's own extended family are speaking carefully coded words behind locked doors. But no one dares confront him, because Peter is no longer just the Tsar. He is the idea that Russia can be reshaped by force, that tradition is a disease to be burned away, that every beard lost is one step closer to modernity, however bloody the journey. You attend a court dinner where one boyar, clean-shaven but clearly uncomfortable, toasts Peter's bravery in shearing the wildness from our faces and our souls. The toast is met with forced laughter. But the next morning, the man is found dead in his study, his own beard preserved in a box, placed on his chest. Suicide, the papers say. Murder, the servants whisper. Peter says nothing at all. One evening, you overhear a soldier reciting a folk riddle to a child. What once showed wisdom, then showed sin, now hides in closets, thin by thin. The answer? A beard. Even the children know now. You pass through villages where the barber's chairs sit empty, moss growing on the leather. Places where men wear false chins, clever contraptions woven of flax and dog hair just to feel whole again. One man tells you he hasn't seen his own chin in 30 years. Now it feels like I'm naked, he says. Not in body, in spirit. And still, the empire hums along. Trains haven't been invented yet, but Peter is building roads, digging canals, drafting plans for a navy that rivals Europe's finest. He is winning wars, gaining land. To the outside world, Russia looks stronger than ever. But you've been on the ground. You've seen the cracks. It's not about beards anymore, if it ever was. It's about identity, control, the face you're allowed to present to the world, and the parts of yourself that get scraped off for someone else's idea of progress. And the people? They're not revolting. Not yet, but they are remembering. The summer arrives with an almost mocking cheer, the kind that turns snow-packed roofs into blooming gardens and makes you forget for a moment. And men, most beardless now, nodding politely at soldiers with clipboards. On the surface, everything looks fine, but you know better. Behind shutters and under floorboards, something is building, less a rebellion and more a rhythm. A low-frequency beat that vibrates in the bones of the city. One you can only feel if you know to listen for it. That's not a marketing slogan, that's code. A quiet nudge of resistance. People are reclaiming little sacred things wherever they can. And in this empire of forced uniformity, even the smallest variation, be it beard or beetle charm, is beginning to feel revolutionary. Still, the government pushes back. Always pushing. This summer, Peter launches his second inspection blitz. It sounds like a bad traveling circus act, and in a way, it is. He dispatches special agents across the provinces, tasked not only with collecting beard taxes, but documenting how thoroughly Western customs are being adopted. They measure coat lengths, document hat shapes, even note the type of buttons on tunics. If you're still wearing homespun linen, that goes on a list. If your wife refuses a corset, that's another list. These records are delivered directly to the capital. And while most are ignored, some result in sudden cultural retraining sessions, forced public lectures, mass haircuts, and in one case, a mandatory mustache-growing contest held in Kaluga. The logic behind that one remains murky. Historians still argue whether Peter was serious about the contest or simply experimenting with what he could make people do. The old woman kneading dough hums it like a lullaby, then says casually, "It was my husband's phrase before they came for him. You ask what happened. They gave him the tax badge. He wore it upside down." She dusts her hands. They didn't like that. And just like that, the mood shifts again. This revolution isn't about blood, not yet. It's about symbols, gestures, little rejections disguised as accidents. Beard badges pinned backward. Foreign coats worn with orthodox crosses embroidered into the lining. Musicians sneaking band folk melodies into court dances. You attend a wedding in a small village by the Volga where every man is clean-shaven, yes, but every child carries a doll with a thick black beard painted on. You ask the bride why. Always alert to unrest. Establishes a new secret police faction, the Aspect Inspectors. That name alone sounds like something out of a horror novella. Their job? Track signs of nostalgic non-compliance. That means anti-Western speech, obviously, but also wistful sighs, visible discomfort during reform lectures. And this is real, excessively emotional reactions to traditional music. You accidentally hum an old folk tune while walking through Arkhangelsk. The puppeteer wears Western dress and speaks with the exaggerated nasal accent of a Petersburg elite. The story is about a silly bearded peasant who refuses to cut his beard and is eventually eaten by a magical goat who wears trousers and speaks French. The children laugh. The adults don't. The next morning, someone has strung up the puppet goat from a tree limb by its tiny necktie. In place of a note, a small patch of real beard hair pinned to the bark with a knitting needle. They go village to village, he says. At night, tell stories. Leave behind tools. What kind of tools? He lowers his voice. Ink, thread, wood, symbols. You realize these aren't weapons. These are instruments for crafting identity. One night, you finally meet one. He appears by your fire, barefoot, beard like iron filings, eyes like smoke. Doesn't say his name. Just pulls a spool of red thread from his cloak and places it in your hand. You know what to do. He vanishes into the woods before dawn. You ask around. Some say the Whisper Men were real monks who rejected both Rome and Moscow. Some say they're just actors. Others claim their spirits personified memories of old Russia, wandering the land until it remembers itself. Historians still argue whether the Whisper Men ever existed in any literal sense, but you've still got that spool of thread in your coat. And every time you touch it, you feel a pulse. So by now, the Empire is divided in two, not geographically, but spiritually. There's the surface world, clean-shaven, efficient, modernizing. And there's the underlayer, the one living between syllables and stitches, in candlelit stories and wrong-way badges and 3-second glances that say, "Me too." You go to a cathedral in Novgorod one Sunday. The priest begins a sermon on humility and obedience. Halfway through, he pauses. Then, with a slow hand, he strokes his chin, freshly shaven, and says, "God does not ask us to change the faces he gave us." Silence. Then one person coughs. Then another stands. And then, softly, quietly, the congregation begins humming something. You can't place it exactly, an old hymn, maybe? Or just a sound from before the scissors. The priest smiles, then keeps reading. Outside, a boy hands you a painted stone. On it is a face, smiling broadly with a massive curly beard and a single tear dripping down its cheek. You keep it, because what's happening now isn't revolution. Not quite. It's fermentation. But word spreading, men across smaller provinces have started refusing to pay the beard tax altogether. At first, officials chalked it up to poor enforcement or rural laziness. But you've seen the truth in glances and gestures and whispered prayers. This is coordinated. The beards are coming back, not just in length, but in pride. Especially the salt traders and fur dealers who depend on age-old trust networks with distant villages. You meet a merchant in Kazan who says he doubled his profits after growing his beard back. "People think I'm honest again," he shrugs. And finally, the artisans, woodworkers, bakers, stonemasons start refusing the tax outright. Not with protest signs or petitions, but with refusal. He responds not with subtlety, but with a decree so over the top it sounds like satire. "The bearded shall not marry." You read it twice to be sure. It's exactly what it sounds like. Priests caught performing unauthorized beard-blessed weddings face exile to Siberia. You go to a wedding a week later, illegal, obviously. Well, the results are mixed. The nobility, for the most part, complies. Not because they believe, but because they're invested. Property, titles, court life, they depend on access. And access depends on image. You attend a Petersburg salon hosted by a countess with a peacock. One guest leans over his wine and mutters, "My beard itches in my dreams." Then excuses himself to vomit in the hedge maze. But outside the court bubble, a weird new honor system is developing. You meet a group of villagers who pass around a carved comb like it's a holy relic. Each man uses it before prayers. They say it belonged to a martyr, someone who refused to shave, was arrested, and died in a work camp. They don't say his name. The story's more important than the man. Another village starts burying beard hairs in tiny jars beside their ancestors, like offerings. A child tells you, dead serious, so they know we still remember. Then one day, something impossible happens. A tax agent defects. Not just disappears, defects. Goes fully rogue, takes his badge, shaves his own head in protest, and begins publishing illegal pamphlets titled, "The Hair of Our Fathers." You read one. It's more poetry than politics, filled with lines like, "He who cuts the beard, cuts the root. He who pays for it sells the seed." You never meet the author in person. No one does. But his words show up everywhere, scratched into fences, tucked into loaves of rye, etched into candle molds. One night, you find a page under your pillow. That's when you start to believe this thing has a pulse. An actual heartbeat. And it's speeding up. Peter, meanwhile, doubles down. He issues yet another decree, confiscate the sacred. Priests caught preaching against the reforms are arrested. Manuscripts describing beards as God's blessing are seized. Icons showing bearded saints are, no joke, edited. You hear rumors of painters being paid to update old icons by subtly trimming the faces of apostles. In a cathedral in Suzdal, someone swaps the revised icons with original versions overnight. The next morning, the congregation weeps with joy. And just like that, enforcement becomes a farce. For every confiscation, 10 new copies appear. Secret printing presses fire up. Traveling bards sing beard ballads under code names. Even tailors start sewing secret messages into the linings of coats, threaded in Morse. Embroidered across the hem, "I remember my father's face. You don't stop him. No one does." By now, you've noticed something else, too. Women are leading. Not in loud ways, not yet, but in constant. There's no fighting. Not yet, but there's something more dangerous brewing. Memory. You see, rebellion doesn't always start with torches. Sometimes it starts with recollection. Of faces. Of rituals. Of freedom that smelled like pine resin and sounded like grandfather's humming psalms. And once memory sharpens, it starts to resist. In Vyaka, a village stages a play. No officials attend, but word spreads. The lead actor wears a beard that stretches to his knees. When the audience claps, it isn't polite. It's thunder. Later, in that same village, someone paints a mural on the side of a barn, a faceless man made entirely of hair. Above him, the words, "You may trim me. You will never own me." It lasts a full day before it's covered in ash. The next morning, 10 more appear in neighboring towns. Historians still debate whether these murals were part of a larger coordinated protest movement or spontaneous acts of symbolic defiance. Either way, something's begun. Not a war. Not yet, but a warming. A glow beneath the frost. You're walking along the frozen banks of the Neva River when the rumors reach you thin and half-frozen like the wind itself. There's talk of a man in Ryazan who hasn't shaved in 12 years. It's not gold. It's a clean shave and a metal shaped like a razor. You laugh, but not for long, because something's off. The river's too quiet. A soldier passes you, eyes darting. You duck into a side street and pretend to be counting apples. There's an unease now woven into the frost. Not fear yet, but the potential for it. Something Peter has never tolerated. Not just resistance, but mockery. And across the empire, laughter is becoming sharper. You hear it in taverns where drunk peasants toast with mugs that say to the beards of old. You hear it in lullabies mothers whisper to children. Songs with lines like, "Shave your face, lose your grace." You even hear it in Petersburg, in the court, behind the thick velvet curtains of the nobility. A joke is a blade you don't see coming. You visit a court painter, once favored by Peter himself, now quietly disgraced. He shows you an unfinished portrait. It's meant to be of the Tsar, regal and barefaced. But look closely. Hidden in the curls of the robe, in the embroidery, is the outline of a face. Long beard? They're remembering out loud. And when memory gets loud, empire gets nervous. Peter's solution? He does what all autocrats eventually try when intelligence fails. He builds a wall. Not a literal one. A paper one. He expands his secret police. The new directive is simple: sniff out dissent wherever it hides, especially among the bearded. Suddenly, you hear later that he refused to shave for his daughter's wedding. The ceremony went ahead in secret. Someone sang an old song. They wore breadcrumbs in their sleeves. It's not just old men now. Young men, farmhands, students, even some low-ranking military start wearing fake beards when theirs won't grow. At first, it's meant to mock the law. But soon it becomes something else, a right. You meet a boy no older than 12 weaving a beard from horsehair. He ties it on, smiles shyly, and says, "Now I can say grace properly." You try not to cry in front of him. In Arkhangelsk, a woman is arrested for selling woolen beards stitched into winter hats. The court calls her a theological seditionist. Her neighbors call her Mama Beard. They hang flowers on her door while she's in prison. She comes back thinner, but smiling. There's a term now passed around in code. The thicket. You hear it whispered between stalls in the market. Did you hear? The thicket grows in the north. Or, don't go to the mayor, he's not with the thicket. The term sticks. So does the idea. Historians still argue whether the thicket was ever a formal organization or simply a myth, a kind of folk shield against Peter's increasingly sharp axe. Either way, it works. Peter's next move? He tries to reframe the narrative. Suddenly, government-sponsored plays appear. Stories of heroes who shave, rise in rank, marry beautiful women. The other half just walks out. The Tsar, furious, bans snickering. That's not a joke. You check the decree twice. No audible mockery allowed in theaters. It's hard to believe this all started with scissors. But then again, maybe not. Hair is power. Hair is heritage. Hair is the part of your body that keeps growing after you die. That remembers the air long after you've stopped breathing. You wake one morning to snow. On your window, someone has drawn a face in the frost, a solemn, bearded figure with a crown. A group of tailors are arrested for designing overcoats that puff out around the chin, disguising beards. The arrests spark protests, not with pitchforks, but with silence. The entire market shuts down for 2 days. No one sells, no one speaks, just stares. The governor sends in troops, but they get spooked. No one wants to be the first to draw blood over facial hair. Still, a line is crossed. From this moment, enforcement gets crueler. Fines double. Shave squads start operating at night. You see men walking home with nicks and blood on their collars. It's no longer about tax revenue, it's about obedience. Peter begins to lose something he's always counted on: fear. The people aren't scared anymore. Not exactly. They're tired, and tired people don't hide. They endure, quietly, deeply, with the patience of frost. You visit a monastery where a hidden room holds dozens of statues, each carved with an impossibly long beard. When the guards came years ago, the monks told them they were historical figures. The guards, confused, left them alone. You sit there a long time, and in the silence you hear it, something ancient waiting. Back in Petersburg, the court begins to fracture. A few nobles, tired of the constant decrees, the fear, the endless masquerade, begin quietly growing stubble. Just enough to notice. You watch a duel between two officers. Neither is supposed to be armed. They both are. The winner bows, beard bloodied but intact. Subtle, but it's there. The edge of something sharper than a razor. Something coming. But the stillness tonight feels thinner, like a canvas stretched too tight, ready to tear. On the streets of Moscow, the bells toll, but their echoes don't linger. Even sound seems careful now. You're not surprised. Not anymore. The resistance isn't loud. It's clever, sometimes funny, sometimes deeply sad, but always growing. In a small village outside Pskov, a traveling puppeteer stages a show. The star? A pig with a human beard, who becomes czar. He demands the animals shave or be sent to the glue factory. The audience howls with laughter. The next day, the puppeteer disappears, but the pig, hand-carved, bristled with horsehair, is found nailed to the governor's door. You can almost hear it ink. Meanwhile, in Petersburg, Peter fumes. He's working himself sick now, obsessive, pacing like a man whose reflection has turned against him. He launches more decrees, tax breaks for those who report beard violations. Peter investigates them all. He can't afford not to. That's the real cost now, not rubles, but control. And like sand in a fist, the harder he grips it, the faster it slips away. In Astrakhan, something cracks. It begins with a sermon. The local archimandrite, who has always walked a fine line between loyalty and dissent, speaks plainly for the first time in years. Some historians believe this was the first moment that changed from protest to movement. Others say it was just weather and boredom. Still, others think Peter planted the sermon himself to flush out radicals. But you remember the feeling, the weight in your chest, and the cold that suddenly didn't feel so cold. Soon, you're hearing about uprisings. Small, contained usually. A village refusing to pay the beard tax. A bishop refusing to turn in a whiskered monk. A blacksmith who forged tiny metal tokens with beards etched into them, worn in secret like charms. Peter, furious, reactivates the Streltsy, the old musketeer units he once disbanded for their disloyalty. But the gamble backfires. These soldiers? Many are old. Many once wore beards with pride. And many have never forgiven Peter for forcing razors onto their faces and shame onto their ranks. You meet one in a candlelit tavern outside Kazan. His beard is gray and stitched onto his scarf. It's not just commoners. The merchant class, who once paid the beard tax without fuss, are beginning to organize. Why? Because business is suffering. Peter once tried to appease them with special permits, allowing select priests to retain their beards for religious reasons. But the clergy, once quiet, have become emboldened. They begin issuing their own tokens, declaring facial hair a divine right. Some parishes refuse to recognize shaven men as truly baptized. In one memorable incident, a newlywed couple is denied their wedding ceremony because the groom's beard was less than 1 inch in sanctity. The church is becoming quietly dangerous, so Peter cracks down harder. Religious dissenters are relocated voluntarily or not. Beard tokens are now only valid if stamped by an imperial officer. A black market blooms. Counterfeit stamps. Secret barbers who would beards rather than remove them. Underground prayer groups who kiss relics shaped like chin hair braids. You're invited to one of these meetings. You leave with a small slice of bread wrapped around a steel comb. A gift. Soon after, in the region of Vologda, it finally erupts. A full-scale mini-revolt. Bearded men surround the governor's house and demand repeal of the tax. They chant old hymns and newer curses. A single musket shot is fired, accidentally maybe, but it's enough. The standoff turns into chaos. 3 buildings burn. 17 are arrested. One child, a girl named Daria, goes missing in the confusion. For days, her name echoes across town squares. You feel the cracks widening. Even nature seems to notice. A sudden frost destroys crops in the west. Priests call it a beard blight, a punishment for shaving holy faces. The superstitions return. Stronger than before. Rats swarm the cities, and some people swear their fur is shaped like mocking little goatees. Children draw them in the snow. Peter starts having dreams. He tells no one. They're songs, and they're not afraid anymore. One morning, you wake to a strange stillness. You walk outside and see it. On nearly every door in your village, someone has carved a beard. Not panicked. Rhythmic. 3 taps, pause, then 1. The signal. You open the door to a cold gust of morning air and a boy, 12, maybe 13. His boots are too big. His coat patched with wax paper. In his hand, a wooden comb tied with red string. No words, just a nod. You take your coat, close the door, and follow him. Past frozen wells and sleeping goats. The meeting place. You've been here before, but never in daylight. And never with this many people. Hundreds. Some are wrapped in wool and scarves. Their faces hidden. Others wear their beards like banners. Some fake, some real, all defiant. A low hum pulses through the crowd, not voices, not yet. Just breathing, as if the land itself is waiting. Then someone steps forward. A woman, maybe 30. You recognize her from the bakery, the one who used to whistle while she kneaded dough. She's not whistling now. She's holding a torch. And behind her? The statue. No one speaks of where it came from. Some say it was sculpted in secret by artists hiding in the ruins of the old Streltsy barracks. Boots planted deep and a flowing beard that twists into roots at his feet. His eyes are closed, peaceful, as if asleep. They call him the last father. And this morning they're going to bury him. But not in the ground, in the air. The woman raises the torch. She speaks 4 words so softly you almost miss them. For what they burned. Then she lights the base. The fire licks up slowly. Because this is not defeat. It's declaration. By dusk, word spreads faster than the ash. Across rivers and forests. In the letters of traveling merchants. In the hushed stories told by firelight. Even Peter hears of it within a day. His advisor, Count Menshikov, reports it plainly. They've burned a statue of a bearded father. No weapons, no slogans, but they came by the hundreds. Peter's hand trembles. He tries to brush soot from his sleeve, though there is none. He mutters, "It's not the fire, it's the silence." He isn't wrong. Historians still debate the significance of this moment. Was it truly political? Was it spiritual? Or simply a rural celebration mistaken for protest? One thing is clear after the burning. Something irreversible shifts. Peter doubles down. Again, he drafts a new edict. One more sweeping than before. All men within imperial lands must now carry visible proof of shaving compliance. Not hidden tokens. Visible. A kind of badge, silver, oval-shaped, worn over the heart. To enforce it, he forms the Clean Guard. Not soldiers, not police. Inspectors. Shaven to the scalp. Dressed in mirrored breastplates, wielding razors holstered like daggers. They patrol cities, towns, villages, stopping men, demanding inspection, issuing fines, sometimes shaving on the spot. One inspector in Novgorod is found shaved bald by rebels and left hanging from a tree, with his badge wedged between his toes. Peter is livid. He demands more prisons built. He orders a new palace wing just for beard tax enforcement records. His paranoia grows. He's seen now pacing the corridors at night, whispering to himself, "They want to make me the tyrant, or clerical error." Beard tokens become collector's items. then religious relics. Entire villages pool funds to pay the tax for one bearded elder, chosen by lottery, who becomes the bearer of honor. He speaks softly. "My beard isn't mine," he says. "It belongs to the people." And you believe him. In secret, gatherings increase. Not riots, not mobs, rituals. You attend one, a comb vigil. Everyone brings a comb. Wooden, metal, glass. Some cracked, others gilded. They place them on the ground in a spiral lit by candles. No one speaks. They just listen to the wind, to the silence, to one another breathing. Some say Peter's spies attend these too, but none ever report back. And still Peter pushes. Women in cities begin smudging ash onto their faces in the shape of beards. A trend erupts, the widow's chin. And just like that, the movement isn't just male anymore. You watch as a girl, maybe 16, walks into the main square of Yaroslavl wearing a veil of dyed horsehair. She lifts it, speaks one word, "Father," and drops a match. The mayor's carriage goes up in flames. He wasn't inside, but his hat was. The symbolism is loud. Even the animals seem caught in the storm. One winter, a circus arrives in Nizhny Novgorod. Among its acts, a trained bear who bows whenever someone mentions Peter. At first, it's funny, then eerie, then dangerous. The bear is shot. The circus disappears. His decree's more erratic. One week, he mandates that all mirrors be rounded to avoid harsh self-reflection. Another, he outlaws poetry about winter, claiming it encourages emotional bearding. Whatever that means, historians still wonder if these decrees were real or the invention of his critics. Some believe Peter never wrote them, his aides did to mock him in coded protest. Watching the beard he shaved off grow back in the faces of his people. Because now, even the palace guards are quietly growing stubble. And the empire, once smooth, now bristles. You're walking through Moscow when you notice something odd. Not the cold. That's always there, biting through your sleeves like a bitter old gossip. Not the guards either. And it's coming from the alley behind a bakery. You follow it, careful not to scuff the snow too loudly. Behind a stack of flour barrels, you spot them, 3 old men, bundled thick as dumplings. And hanging from each braid, tiny brass tokens. They tinkle like bells every time they laugh. These aren't just beards. These are declarations. One man catches your stare and winks. "Don't worry," he says, stroking his whiskers. "The Tsar's too busy making cannonballs out of cheese." He might not be wrong. Peter the Great, once the storm sweeping westward, his court has grown too quiet. When Peter enters a room, the nobles used to rise, make sweeping bows, laugh a little too hard at his jests. Now, they murmur about migraines. Of course, every week, some new twist. All dogs with long facial fur must be trimmed. Portraits of saints may not depict facial hair more than 2 inches long. Not enough to be arrested over. You've learned the balance. In the market, sellers now offer shadow dyes, little pots of pigment to fake stubble or mask it. You keep one in your pocket, just in case. But it's not about hiding anymore. It's about waiting, because something's coming. Everyone feels it. The streets hum differently now. Church bells seem heavier. Even the snow falls slower, as if it's pausing to listen. And then news breaks. Peter is ill. The kind of illness you don't whisper in public, but everyone already knows. Something internal. Liver. Vanished. Not fired. Not reassigned. Just gone. Their headquarters in St. Petersburg is found abandoned. Mirrors shattered. Razors left behind. One final message carved into the oak door. "We're not needed. You've already won, but no one knows who you is." Peter does not die immediately. No, he lingers. Long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. Long enough for rumors to rise like steam. Some say he begged for a beard on his deathbed. Others claim he asked his guards to let the old believers back into the cities. There's even a tale that. Others say he believed himself a martyr, misunderstood, but righteous. But you were there, remember? Not in the palace, not by his bed, in the streets, and you saw what happened next. No explosion, no war, just a ripple. A quiet uprising made of brush strokes and breadcrumbs. A market stall begins selling beard bread, a dark rye shaped like curled whiskers. His successors, uncertain, temporary, quietly retire the beard tax. Not because they're enlightened, but because it's easier. cheaper, and far, far less likely to spark fire. The beard tokens? Collected mostly, melted down perhaps, but many are kept tucked into boxes beside family crosses passed down like relics. You have one. You keep it not for what it meant, but for what it failed to erase. Because the beard tax, for all its absurdity, became more than a rule. It became a mirror, and in that mirror, years after Peter's death, standing by a frozen river with your grandson, he asks you why you grow your beard so long, why you tie little combs into the ends during the winter. You smile. You tell him, because it once made a king tremble. He laughs and ties a string to his own chin, pretending. He doesn't need to know every detail, but he will, eventually. And now maybe the beard tax? Officially repealed? Not quite. See, the edict remains on parchment somewhere in the fortress archives, but the enforcement vanishes like frost under the morning sun. An impromptu celebration breaks out the week after Peter's funeral. Not a loud one, Russia doesn't do loud grief, but a simmering joy. Old men parade through the square, their beards decorated with dried berries and ribbons. Women braid hair onto their brothers' chins as a joke. Kids chase each other, pretending to be czarist inspectors, then collapse laughing in the snow. And you, of course, watch it all. You, who survived the silent years, who paid your copper token, your shame in hand, just to keep the peace. Historians debate whether the tax truly caused a mini-revolt. Some call it a cultural hiccup. Others insist it was the first crack in an imperial dam. Still others argue the beard tax wasn't about hair at all, but identity, power, resistance in slow motion. They're all right and all wrong. You think about Father Vasily, who once burned his beard rather than bow. About Anya, who drew bearded saints in secret. About the gilded lice, men who didn't believe but complied, who vanished with neither honor nor disgrace. They were all caught in the same storm. Peter's storm. And storms don't ask for belief. They simply blow. Still, what followed wasn't calm. No, Russia reeled for decades after Peter's death. Maybe 12. His cheeks are smooth, but he holds a carved wooden icon of a saint with a thick, curling beard. Is that Saint Nicholas? You ask. He shakes his head, eyes shining. No, that's Saint Grandfather. You laugh. He's not in the Bible. The boy shrugs. He's in my papa's book. He had a beard so wise it whispered prayers. You buy a candle from him anyway. Even now, centuries later, you can walk the winter streets of an old Russian town and see men with full beards nod at one another like keepers of a long joke. A joke with razors, tokens, and a czar who tried to scrape away identity with scissors. They remember, and so do you. Even as your steps slow, your joints crack like old wood, and your beard fades to silver. You remain a part of it, not the tax, not the protest. The choice, to say in your own quiet way, I exist, on your final winter's night. As the wind hums against the shutters and the fire dips low, you reach for the box under your bed. The token is still there. Dented, yes. A bit tarnished, but real. You place it beside your bed and fall asleep to the sound of snow brushing glass, thinking of all the beards that came after. Some short, some long. And now the streets fall silent again. No snow crunching under boots. No coins clinking in the palms of nervous barbers. No soft laughter echoing through alleys behind bakeries. Just you, lying still, listening. Your journey through the world of beard taxes and imperial decrees is done for the night. The candle has burned low. The faces, some smooth, some bristled, have all passed by like smoke from a warm hearth. Let it all soften. Let the images melt into something dreamlike. A faint shimmer of copper tokens, a flicker of candlelight catching in the curls of an old monk's beard, a gust of wind through the corridors of a palace that once buzzed with the chaos of reform. You've walked alongside villagers. A quiet ember in the long hush of a story finished. Let your breath slow as if you're exhaling centuries of noise. Feel the warmth of the room wrap around you like a thick fur cloak. Let that whisper carry you through the night. Sleep well and dream of beards,